Welcome to All About Coffee, a page-by-page podcast. We're exploring William Harrison Ueker's century-old coffee encyclopedia, All About Coffee. One page, one paragraph, one sentence, one rabbit hole at a time, whatever it takes to work our way through over 800 pages of what was arguably the most important coffee book of the 20th century. I'm your host, Chief Annotationist, Director of Digressions, and Vice President of Asides, Mike Ferguson. Welcome to a never-ending journey through every single page, you've been warned, of W.H. Ueker's All About Coffee.
The precious plant, this friendly plant, Mocha's happy tree, the gift of heaven, the plant with the jessamine-like flowers, the most exquisite perfume of Araby, the blessed, given to the human race by the gift of the gods.
That was our old friend Betty B. from LibriVox.org, reading from the page numbered Roman numeral 27 in All About Coffee, one of the pages we will discuss in this episode, episode 4 of All About Coffee, a page-by-page podcast. In this episode, we are going to talk about Roman numeral pages 13 through 29, which means, technically, we are still talking about the front matter, all the pages that come before the pages with Arabic numerals, which means we will not finally hit page 1 of the book until next episode. The 16 pages we will look at in this episode are the table of contents, which somewhat astoundingly takes up 7 pages, the list of illustrations, which also and surprisingly takes up 7 pages, the one-page coffee thesaurus, and if you listen to episode 2 on the preface, you know I'm using air quotes around the word thesaurus. And finally, one page titled The Evolution of a Cup of Coffee, which is basically a 24-step seed-to-cup list. And yes, I'm as excited to talk about the table of contents as you are to hear about them. So, how do we get a 7-page table of contents? Let me tell you. You have 36 chapters plus the appendices, 796 pages. Note, the reason I always say over 800 pages at the top of each episode is because we have 796 pages plus 29 pages of front matter. Even if we remove blank pages and pages we might not consider content, like the list of illustrations, the title page, etc., we still have 804 pages. All right, I almost bored myself there for a second. So the fact that we have 36 chapters begins to explain why the table of contents is so long. But wait, the 1935 edition has 38 chapters and more pages, mostly because there was more science to cover by that time, and yet the table of contents, which is actually titled The Scheme of Contents in the 1935 edition, all fits on one single page. The thing of it is in the 1935 edition, Mr. Ueker's only gives us the title of each chapter in the table of contents. In the 1922 edition, he includes detailed outlines of each chapter in the table of contents, and that's why they stretch to 7 pages. These detailed outlines also appear as headers to each chapter. Here's an example from Chapter 4, Introduction of Coffee into Western Europe. As noted, the following 8 subjects not only appear as chapter headings, but the whole list is also in the table of contents. I'm going to number them, though Ueker's does not number them in his book. Number 1. The 3 great temperance beverages, cocoa, tea, coffee, came to Europe. Aside, note Mr. Ueker's nod once again to prohibition, i.e. temperance beverages, which became law while he was writing the book. Continuing. Number 2. Coffee first mentioned by Rauwolf in 1582. Number 3. Early days of coffee in Italy. Number 4. How Pope Clement VIII baptized it and made it a truly Christian beverage. Number 5, the first European coffee house in Venice, 1645. Number 6, the famous Café Florian. Number 7, other celebrated Venetian coffee houses of the 18th century. Number 8, the romantic story of Piedracchi, the poor lemonade vendor who built the most beautiful coffee house in the world. Oddly, these chapter outlines that appear in the table of contents and at the beginning of each chapter don't always appear or match the section headings within the body of the chapter. For example, in the chapter outline we have, quote, How Pope Clement VIII baptized it and made it a truly Christian beverage, end quote. But inside the chapter, the section heading for that content is just labeled simply, Coffee Baptized by the Pope. I say this is odd because the outline fails as a search tool if you don't have a corresponding section heading in the text. The Chapter 4 outline lists 8 subjects, but the chapter itself features only 2 section headings. So if I'm looking to read the romantic story of Piedraki, the poor lemonade vendor, I have to scan the text for the word Piedraki. It's a small point, and that, of course, is why I bring it up. This small point notwithstanding, these peeks into the content of each chapter can be helpful when the book is being used as an encyclopedia, but make the table of contents somewhat unwieldy. I think their usefulness in the table of contents as a tool for narrowing your search for a specific topic is offset by having to flip through so many pages to find the chapter subject to begin with, rather than just scanning down a list on a single page of contents. When you consider that the 7-page list of illustrations vanished completely from the 1935 edition, I think the reasons the 7-page table of contents was taken down to 1 page in 1935 may have been totally functional. My guess is he needed to make room for additional content, mostly new science, and he did that by removing front matter. As mentioned, the 1922 edition was 796 pages plus 29 pages of front matter, but the 1935 edition was 818 pages with only 14 pages of front matter, 14 pages of the 15-page reduction in the front of the 1935 book were the table of contents and the list of illustrations. The coffee thesaurus, air quotes, was moved to the appendices. And since we're talking about the 1935 table of contents, or scheme of contents, a little aside, Mr. Euchers used the 1935 edition to not only update and expand the science and technical sections of his book, but to better organize the book, which can be seen in the table of contents. The 1935 edition is organized into 6 books. Book 1 is historical, Book 2 is technical, Book 3 is scientific, Book 4 is commercial, Book 5 is social, and Book 6 is artistic. If you own a copy of All About Coffee, your table of contents is very likely 1 page and organized into those 6 books. But back to the 1922 table of contents, don't worry, I'm not going to read the table of contents to you. Let's just talk about it. There are 14 chapters of history. He spends around 20 pages on the early history of coffee growing and drinking. This is where he gives what he calls the Near East its historical due. So we get what is a relatively minor glimpse into what the world of coffee looked like before it was known in Europe. I think this is less due to his European bias than it is simply due to the availability or lack thereof of information. Not surprisingly then, most of the history he writes is the history of coffee consumption in the West. He writes a general history of coffee drinking throughout Europe, as mentioned earlier in Chapter 4, and then drills down, giving whole chapters to France, England, Holland, and Germany. While we can assume he included England and France because he had been to those countries, and maybe Germany because it's where his father was born, I have no idea why Holland gets a chapter and Italy is relegated to a general overview of Europe, especially when he credits the Pope for giving coffee to the world. I would bet it has something to do with the amount of source material he and his helpers had access to, and also Holland, more accurately the Dutch people, have played a significant role in coffee history. He will then switch to writing the history of coffee houses in Paris and London, but not before writing something of a hybrid chapter titled Telling How Coffee Came to Vienna, which covers both how coffee drinking became a thing and how coffee houses came about. I have a feeling there's a reason why Vienna is singled out for special treatment. We'll see. But when it comes to page count, British coffee history wins with a total of 46 pages. North America comes in a distant second at a total of 26 pages, as he mirrors the technique he used for Europe, writing a general country history and then drilling down to give full chapters to New York and Philadelphia. I suspect the only reason Philadelphia won out over Boston for an entire chapter to itself is that Philadelphia is where he was born, and it was also more accessible for the New Yorker in terms of research. There are 4 chapters of science, 2 of which were not written by Mr. Euchers. There are 9 chapters that could be loosely classified as the supply chain chapters, covering coffee around the world and how coffee is grown, processed, shipped, bought, sold, roasted, ground, packaged, and merchandised at retail. He spends 5 chapters and nearly 150 pages on the history of the coffee trade in the United States, the longest being 40 pages devoted to the history of coffee equipment. The most boring of these 4 industry history chapters is Chapter 30, which at times reads like parts of the Old Testament, with long paragraphs that are just lists of names. There are paragraphs that are clearly intended to just document names for the record, and not really intended to read. Perhaps when the book was written, and a reader might be familiar with some of the hundreds of names along with their associated companies, it would have been interesting. but they are useful today when one is trying to construct coffee industry genealogies, as one does. He spends a hefty 30-plus page chapter on brewing coffee, its history, brewing around the world, and the latest developments. 46 pages make up 2 chapters that are devoted to coffee and art and literature, which reminds me, I forgot to end episode 3 with a few lines of coffee poetry from chapter 32. And oh man, the emails, the cards and letters, the voicemails and telegrams I received, all complaining that I forgot the poetry. So let's do a few lines now to make up for it. From To the Coffee House by Peter Altenberg of Vienna. When you are worried, having trouble of one sort or another, to the coffee house. When she did not keep her appointment for one reason or another, to the coffee house. When your shoes are torn and dilapidated, coffee house. When your income is 400 crowns and you spend 500, coffee house. By all means, if you spend more than you make or your shoes are falling off your feet, go to a coffee house. After the list of chapters, we have the coffee chronology, bibliography, and index, and with that, I have made reference to each chapter in the book, and we are done with the 7-page table of contents. Next comes the 7-page list of illustrations. There are 17 color plates in the book. 15 are hand-painted photographs, and 2 are paintings, both by renowned artists as detailed in episode 1 of this podcast, one by Blendon Campbell and one by M.E. Hinton. They are the only images in the list of illustrations that receive attribution within the illustrations list itself. When I look at the images, both of flowers and cherries on the branch, side by side, I think it's clear that unlike Campbell, Hinton was a professional botanical artist. Campbell was a great artist, but Hinton knew her way around a leaf. As I said in episode 1, I think Mr. Euchers would have been very proud to feature these 2 well-known artists in his book, just like he was probably proud to have hired the most renowned photographers in New York to take his headshot, just like he was proud to engage one of the most prestigious law firms in New York, just like he was proud to live in the highfalutin Gramercy Park Hotel. There are 540 black and white illustrations. This includes photos and drawings. There are 93 portraits, 31 maps, charts, and diagrams. I'm just going to call out a few of the notable portraits. John Arbuckle, founder of Arbuckle's, the coffee that won the West, and the company that would create U-Ban.
Deep, dark, delicious U-Ban.
C.E. Bickford, who could be considered one of the primary, if not the creator, of cup testing, a.k.a. coffee cupping. M.J. Brandenstein, the MJB and MJB coffee.
MJB Premium Flake Ground.
It's rich and it's mild.
Jabez Burns, inventor and manufacturer of coffee equipment. Jabez Burns & Sons gave Mr. Euchers what was, as far as we know, his start in coffee when they hired him to edit their customer and employee newsletter, Spice Mill. And Jabez Burns & Sons would one day become a part of Probat. J.A. Folger, both senior and junior.
Folger's Coffee, mountain grown for richer flavor.
Wright and James Gillies. Gillies Coffee is still with us today, the oldest coffee brand in the U.S. J.O. Cheek, who was president of the National Coffee Roasters Association in 1922 when Mr. Euchers published All About Coffee, and whose company introduced Maxwell House Coffee in 1892.
Maxwell House Coffee is good to the last drop. Enjoy the rich, fresh taste of Maxwell House Coffee. The ground coffee that tastes as good as it smells every time. Maxwell House.
And ironically, I suppose, given that they were still using anti-coffee advertising to sell their coffee substitute, Postum bought Maxwell House in 1928, and soon after, Postum became General Foods. In the 1970s, the spokesperson for Maxwell House was Cora the shopkeeper, played by Margaret Hamilton, who was the Wicked Witch in the 1939 movie The Wizard of Oz.
Cora, what's going on?
Percy, everyone's tasting Maxwell House ADC.
ADC Automatic Drip Coffee.
ADC's made just for the new coffee makers, specially ground and blended. Tastes so good, 3 of the machine makers recommend it.
Folks sure drinking a lot. Good.
So good, I'll be selling a lot.
Got a special machine? Get a special coffee. Norelco recommends ADC Automatic Drip Coffee.
And David G. Evans, whose company introduced Old Judge's Coffee, which you've probably never heard of, but I'm going to play a commercial clip because the commercials for Old Judge's are so emblematic of local coffee TV advertising in the 50s.
Hello there. I'm the Old Judge Coffee Magician. There's no trick to making a cup of good coffee, not when you use Old Judge coffee. Old Judge is processed in 3 grinds. Regular grind for percolators, drip grind for drippolators, and fine grind for glass coffee making. Old Judge will make 80 or 90 or 100 cups per pound and still retain its distinctive Old Judge flavor.
Mr. Euchers is only around 24 images shy of having 1 illustration for every page in the book, excluding the appendices and front matter. I have to believe this helped increase the book's popularity and accessibility. As mentioned, a list of illustrations is not included in the 1935 edition, and my theory is that it was a needless academic touch that he deleted to make room for more science content. I'm not sure how useful the list was in print, but I have to say the list is particularly useful online, at least in the Gutenberg Project's digital version, because each item in the list of illustrations is hyperlinked to the corresponding image. Do we still say hyperlink? In the list of 31 maps, charts, and diagrams, the maps are, of course, the best things. There is a world map of coffee-growing regions and several regional maps. There is a, quote, map showing the location of many of the old London coffee houses previous to the fire of 1748, end quote. It's striking to see so many coffee houses crowded into just a few blocks, or what would basically be one city block in most large American cities. The fire of 1748 started at 1 a.m. on March 25th in a wig maker's shop. An astonishing 17 coffee houses were damaged or destroyed. At first, I thought Mr. Euchers was incorrect when he identified the map as depicting the location of coffee houses previous to the fire of 1748, because the map, which was published in London Magazine, depicts the damage the fire inflicted on the neighborhood. In the upper left-hand corner, there's a legend indicating that dotted buildings are those that burned, and the striped buildings are those that were damaged. In the bottom right-hand corner, the map is titled, A New and Correct Plan of All the Houses Destroyed and Damaged by the Fire which Began in Exchange Alley, Cornhill, on Friday, March 25th, 1748. I thought, aha, Mr. Euchers, you are in error. But then I realized that while the map does show which buildings were damaged or destroyed, it did technically also still depict where they were located before the fire. In the magazine, the map also included a caption that does not appear in Mr. Euchers' version of the map. It reads, A larger plan of this dreadful fire with the names of ye sufferers engraved on the place of their respective habitations may be had of M. Payne at the White Hart in Pater Noster Row. I expect we will spend more time talking about ye fire when we come to this map in the text, but I will tell you the reason I find the fact that 17 coffee houses were damaged or destroyed so astonishing. Today, if you were to start at the Jamaica House Wine Shop, located roughly where the Jamaica Coffee House was located in 1748, one of the damaged but not destroyed coffee houses, at the far east end of the fire, and walk to Pope's Head Alley at the far west end of the fire, that walk would take you 3 minutes, 1/10 of 1 mile. Walking the north-south length of the fire zone at its widest part would take you 2 minutes, less than 500 feet. So there were at least 17 coffee houses in a neighborhood where you could walk the perimeter in less than 10 minutes. Okay, now we can leave the table of contents and list of illustrations behind and look at some real content, the coffee thesaurus, air quotes. As I said during episode 2 when we covered the preface, I don't think the coffee thesaurus is really a thesaurus, but you can judge for yourself. And to be fair, although he labels this section as a thesaurus, Mr. Euchers introduces his list with the following, quote, encomiums and descriptive phrases applied to the plant, the berry, and the beverage. Encomium is yet another word with which I was unfamiliar. It means a speech or piece of writing that praises someone or something highly. Eulogy is listed as a synonym. I think it fair to say that Mr. Euchers was a walking coffee encomium. The list includes 7 euphemisms for the plant, 16 euphemisms for the berry, and 76 euphemisms for the beverage. Betty B. has already read the 7 euphemisms for the plant, and I'll only mention some highlights for the berry and beverage. For the berry, the magic bean, voluptuous berry, Yemen's fragrant berry, thought-inspiring bean of Arabia. For the beverage, nectar divine, ruddy mocha, a man's drink, lovable liquor, the American drink, ambrosia of the gods, the intellectual drink, a psychological necessity, the fighting man's drink, the revolutionary beverage, lovelier than 1,000 kisses, at once a pleasure and a medicine, the fire which consumes our griefs, the autocrat of the breakfast table, coffee which makes the politician wise. If only. Many of these can be found in Chapter 32, Coffee and Literature, or other places in the book. Few of them roll off the tongue as terms that might actually have been used in conversation, which is why I always put air quotes around the word thesaurus. My theory is, as Mr. Euchers worked to gather material for the chapter on coffee and literature, he noticed that poets tend not to just say the word coffee, but come up with metaphors, which is sort of their job description. He started to collect these coffee descriptions, and at some point, it occurred to him he could include his list in the book. This is Euchers as curator. Maybe, and to be clear, I'm just making things up now, he used to share these at gatherings, and someone suggested he publish them. Given his experience as a performer in his youth, it's easy for me to imagine him using these as toasts when drinking coffee with friends and colleagues. I just see him sitting at a table with friends and staring thoughtfully at his coffee, perhaps during the war when the news was bad, and then raising his cup in toast and uttering, "The fire which consumes our grief," as the poet says. On the other hand, I can't imagine a coffee trader on Wall Street in 1920 on a coffee break asking another coffee trader if he'd like a cup of nectar divine. A fine euphemism for coffee and even a better drag name. Actually, Nectar Divine is the name of at least one anthology of writing, at least one music group, and something called a status effect in video games, or a group of video games. Something to do with video games. What's missing are actual synonyms for coffee like cup of Java, cup of Joe, cup of mud, cup of mocha. Secretary of the Navy, Josephus Daniels, banned alcohol from ships in 1914. So during the war, the strongest drink available for sailors at sea, coffee, became resentfully known as a cup of Joe. It may be that the term had not yet passed from military to popular usage when Mr. Euchers was writing all about coffee, or maybe he only wanted phrases that came from poetry. My guess is the latter. We have an example of the president of the American Chemical Society referring to a cup of Java in an 1894 speech, but we can't know if he was using Java as a generic for coffee or he was actually referring to a cup of coffee made with beans from the East Indies. At that time, any coffee from any Indonesian island was called Java. I can find examples of Java being used for just any old cup of coffee in 1923 and 1925, but even if Mr. Euchers was aware of this slang, I don't think he would consider it for his list because, again, not poetry. But I also can see him declaring, maybe even looking down his nose while he did so, that unless the coffee in the cup actually came from the island of Java, we had no business calling it Java. We should be honest, he might say, and call it a cup of Santos because that's what it probably is. At the beginning of his coffee career, a cup of Java, or bag of Java, was indeed more likely to be from Brazil than any island in the East Indies. In 1916, while Mr. Euchers was still in the gathering and sorting of material phase for All About Coffee, Food Inspection Decision 82 declared that only coffee grown on the island of Java could be called Java. In 1921, the Bureau of Chemistry went a step further and declared that Robusta, even if it was grown on Java, could not be called Java. Mr. Euchers references these regulations in All About Coffee, so I guess he might have been hyper-aware of not messing with the word Java, but primarily I think he's just not going to sink to the level of slang on any list of coffee descriptions. Finally, we come to the evolution of a cup of coffee page, the last page of this episode. This is a list of 24 seed-to-cup steps. The list is overlaid on a black and white photo of roasted coffee. It's about what you'd expect if you know coffee, with a few exceptions. So let's just read them all without too much comment, because these topics will be covered in the book. Before he gets to the list, he has a one-sentence intro, quote, showing the various steps through which the bean passes from plantation to cup, end quote. The list will take about a minute to read. Step 1. Wait, I have a better idea. Oh, Betty.
1. Planting the seed in nursery. 2. Transplanting into rows. 3. Cultivating and pruning. 4. Picking the cherries. 5. Pulping. 6. Fermenting. 7. Washing. 8. Drying in the parchment. 9. Hulling. 10. Polishing. 11. Grading. 12. Transporting to the seaport. 13. Buying and selling for export. 14. Transshipment overseas. 15. Buying and selling at wholesale. 16. Shipment to the point of manufacture. 17. Separating. 18. Milling. 19. Mixing or blending. 20. Roasting. 21. Cooling and stoning. 22. Buying and selling at retail. 23. Grinding. 24. Making the beverage.
Thank you, Betty. I do want to cover a few things from the list. Did you notice anything odd as Betty took us through the journey from seed to cup? It would be easy to miss when you're listening rather than reading. Step 14, we have coffee on the water. Step 15, we have landed coffee being bought and sold at wholesale. Step 16, we have coffee being shipped to the point of manufacture, meaning the roaster. Then we have step 17, separating, and step 18, milling. What? These steps at this point in the supply chain do not make sense to our 2024 coffee industry ears. They amount to what we would consider reconditioning coffee today, something that would be done at the warehouse level, not by the roaster. Without jumping ahead to the material we will cover in, maybe 6 or 7 years, 100 years ago it was not uncommon for coffee roasters, albeit large roasters, to have processing equipment, like machines that could separate beans by size or even machines that could provide additional cleaning and polishing in their facilities. But more on this when we get to that section of the book one day. Most coffee roasters have had all-hands-on-deck days when they need to recondition coffee by hand because there was some error in the supply chain. I'm sure they all would have been grateful for some processing equipment on those days, as rare as they might be today. I did some word counting to judge how much space Mr. Euchers might devote to various points along the supply chain. Not a perfect piece of research designed by any means, but I did it anyway. On the production side of supply, the word picking wins with 48 appearances, but just barely over grading, 47. Parchment is mentioned 42 times, hulling 40, cherry or cherries 35 times, and pulping 33 times. These counts are of the words being used in the context of coffee production. For example, we have to delete 6 uses of the word cherry because you've got your cherry streets, your cherry wines, your cherry stone, your cherry gardens, and your cherry hill. And I apologize, I must digress here. You'll note the phrase cherry stone, which I mentioned is a phrase that appears in All About Coffee. Cherry stone appears on a list of rarities that were allegedly on display at a coffee house owned by a man named Don Salerto in the early 18th century in order to attract customers. By 1760, it was said the collection had grown to include the following items, which Mr. Euchers included in All About Coffee: tiger's tusk, the Pope's candle, the skeleton of a guinea pig, a fly-cap monkey, a piece of the true cross, the 4 evangelists' heads cut out on a cherry stone, the King of Morocco's tobacco pipe, Mary Queen of Scots' pincushion, Queen Elizabeth's prayer book, a pair of nuns' stockings, Job's ears, which grew on a tree, a frog in a tobacco stopper, and 500 more odd relics. It seems a fly cap was a kind of hat worn by women at one time. A cherry stone is, as you probably guessed, the seed of a cherry. Sources outside of Euchers claim this collection also included a giant's tooth and, Pontius Pilate's wife's, chambermaid's, sister's hat. Mention of these words from the supply chain does seem to reflect how much Mr. Euchers writes about them. Note, the word roasting occurs 544 times. And that's the end of Mr. Euchers' Seed to Cup list and the end of this episode. So it's time for poetry from Chapter 32 on coffee and literature. Coffee and Crumpets was published in Fraser's Magazine in 1837. Its author, writes Mr. Euchers, calls himself Lancelot Littledew. And here are just 4 lines from the very long poem titled Coffee and Crumpets. Fill the bowl, but not with wine, potent port, or fiery sherry. For this milder cup of mine, crush me Yemen's fragrant berry. Next episode, page 1 of the actual text, if you can believe it. You've been listening to All About Coffee, a page-by-page podcast, written, read, and produced by me, Mike Ferguson. And at this moment, I'll take wine over coffee. Thank you very much. All About Coffee, a page-by-page podcast, is an independent podcast brought to you by Kavoya Specialty Coffee and presented by the Exchange Coffee Podcasting Network in beautiful downtown Providence, Rhode Island, atop the historic Tilden Thurber Building, home to the Exchange, Another Cup, Extra Shot, and Ristretto podcasts. Visit and explore at KavoyaCoffee.com, where coffee is always a collaborative voyage. Our theme music is My Buddy by Henry Burr, originally recorded in 1922. You can email me with questions, thoughts, ideas, and synonyms for the word coffee at allaboutcoffeepage-by-page@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. And here's a little extra clips from the worst coffee advertising in history.
Don't serve your awful coffee with my steaks. Your coffee just doesn't taste any good.
Oh, honey, happiness is a vacation. Away from your coffee.
Forget the coffee, Marge. It's never very good.
That sergeant at the station makes better coffee than this.
I'm serious. Honey, your coffee's undrinkable. You know, the girls down at the office make better coffee on their hot plates.
This coffee is criminal. Your coffee really is murder.